Kick off summer with Memorial Day savings at Lowe's. Right now, get 5 Scott's Naturescapes 1.5 cubic foot mulch bags for just $10. Plus, get up to 40% off select major appliances and save an extra $50 on every $500 you spend on select major appliances $396 or more. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 5/28. Mulch offer excludes Alaska and Hawaii. Selection varies by location. While supplies last. See Lowe's.com for more details.
Blog Talk Radio.
All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Ted Odorico, and we've got a great show for you tonight, another Thursday evening here. In fact, the last Thursday of the month of May. We're already going to be heading in next week in the month of June. It's almost halfway through the year. It's hard to believe how fast the 2016 season is going. But anyways, we're glad that you were able to join us tonight on the show. Glad that you're tuning in. And just to remind everybody, of course, we are live on Thursday evenings from 6 to 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. That's 7 to 9 p.m. for those of you on the East Coast, and 4 to 6 for those of you out in Pacific Time. Appreciate you tuning in live for those of you can. But for some reason, if you can't, just go to blogtalkradio.com /Golf Talk Live, which is the general link for the show. And if you can't tune in live, you can just scroll down there to the on-demand section, and you can listen to the show a little bit later at your leisure. But again, I appreciate you those tuning in live during the broadcast. Also, if you want to speak to any of the guests during the live broadcast, you can do so by calling in at area code 646-716-4667. Would love to have you join in the discussion if you so choose. And also, if you want to email questions or comments about the program, you can do so by sending them to my email, which is ted.golftalklive@gmail.com. And if you're somebody in the golf profession, if you're a teacher professional, maybe you're a coach or an entrepreneur or somebody that's maybe put together an interesting golf book that you want to share with my audience, I'd love to have you. You can also reach out to me through my email as well. And again, that is ted.golftalklive@gmail.com, and I will certainly be glad to add you into the mix. And just to give you the heads up, we're already booked right through to the end of July. So got lots of great guests coming up here in the weeks to come. And I hope you'll continue to tune in and spread the word. Don't forget, go to blogtalkradio.com /Golf Talk Live. Share that link. Would love to have more listeners tune in. Also, updates on social media on Facebook.com. Go to facebook.com /Golf Talk Live blog. That's the page that I update on, including my own personal page. And while you're there, make sure that you like the page if you haven't already done so. And you can also follow me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Ted and Buck CEO. CEO, of course, is in capital letters. And thanks again to all of the new followers. Got a great show for you. Starting up here in just a moment is going to be another great Coach's Corner. Got Clint Wright, Lloyd Higley, and Anthony Brooks going to be joining us here in just a second. And then a little bit later in the show, PGA Master Professional John Hughes is going to be joining me. And a little bit later in our conversation, we're going to be joined by Mike Hammond from Game Golf. He's going to be coming on. He's the Director of Channel Sales for Game Golf. He's going to be joining in about halfway through the conversation with John. We're going to talk about some very interesting things tonight a little bit later in the broadcast. But as I said, I got a great panel all ready to go here, so let me just bring them out. First up, of course, is become a good friend over the years, Clint Wright, 30-year member of the PGA. He's also a partner at TGM Golf and a big proponent of the R3 approach, which you've heard him talk about with his partners here on the show before, and obviously one of my favorite guests. Another favorite guest as well, hasn't been on the show for a little while, but he's joining back in the mix as well, is Lloyd Higley. And he's a teacher professional up at the Chicagoland Golf Academy and considered to be among the top pros in the Chicago area, so you want to make sure you look him up. And a fairly newcomer to the show, but certainly not a newcomer to the business, Anthony, or abbreviatedly known as Tony Brooks. He's a PGA Master Professional, with a professional background, which also includes a successful tenure as a competitive golfer, as well as receiving one of the highest honors, which is a PGA Master Professional among about 400 plus of his fellow pros. And he was also a former head professional who started his career as an apprentice at the famed Riviera Country Club in Los Angeles, California. Gentlemen, welcome to Coach's Corner.
I'm glad to be here.
Thank you.
All right. I hope I got everything correct there. I apologize if I slipped up a couple of times with my tongue, but I'm sure you'll forgive me. All right, guys, we're going to have a great discussion tonight, and I gave you a little bit of a heads up before we went on the air. One of the first questions, and Clint, I'm going to start with you if you don't mind, with the conversation, and
Sure.
We're going to talk about first off the dangers of seeking that perfection. A lot of club golfers, a lot of amateurs out there are always trying to perfect their swing, perfect their game, and it almost becomes an obsession. Let's talk a little bit about some of the dangers of doing that. And we certainly want them to improve. We want to help them to improve their game, but some of them take it a little bit overboard. What are some of the dangers of doing that, of trying to become too perfect in your golf game?
Well, Ted, to start with, I think you're talking about two different things. Whether they want to improve their swing or improve their game, in my opinion, is two different things.
Right.
And the dangers, if there are any, I mean, they're just not obtainable. They get to a point to where they're focused so much on the swing motion and
right.
hitting the ball better, is that they never really ever have the luxury of going over and learning how to play. Yeah, we talk about this all the time, and that's the danger I see. Is they get stuck in their swing mechanics ideas. They go to the range all the time. They get stuck there, and their game never improves, and that's the danger. The danger is their game never improves, their score never goes down, and they either are extremely frustrated players or they don't play at all.
Yeah, and
that's
you're
the
right.
danger. They never get that opportunity to really work on their game.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. It is two different areas, and thank you for pointing that out. Lloyd, I think maybe part of the problem that we see out there with a lot of the amateurs is they're watching these, pros on television, the Tiger Woods and the Mickelsons and some of the others out there as well, the McIlroys, and they're seeing these guys, grinding it out, even out in the range. Those that have the luxury of going to a PGA event, see them out on the practice area, and they're just working and honing on their skills, as Clint talked about, and working on their swing and getting everything down pat. And they think that that's what they've got to do in order to play better golf. And certainly you do have to work at some of the fundamentals, but at the same time, as Clint pointed out, you've got to work and play the game as well to become better. Working on mechanics alone is not going to make you necessarily a better golfer. It's going to help, but it's not going to make you a better golfer. Is that one of the dangers that you see as well, that they're trying to mimic too many of the pros that they see on TV?
Yeah, I think that's a real, thing for all your amateur golfers. Are trying to be get in the same positions that Rory McIlroy's getting into, or get into the same positions or that Tiger is doing and all that. And and back to what Clint was just saying, and I agree with him 100%. I do lessons, and I'll have classes of beginners and even a little bit advanced players and all that. And I can't tell you how many times the beginners or the people in my groups will sit there and go, do you think I'm good enough now to go out and play? And I sit there, I go, yeah, go play. What are you doing? I say, and I kind of tell my students when they go out there for their, I take a lot of my beginners out, part of their group classes, and we go out and we play a few holes, and I tell them, I says, listen, 90% of the people that are out there playing stink anyways. They just stink further up the fairway than you do. You don't hit it as far and all that stuff. And they're so worried that people are watching them and that I'm not going to do it right and all that. So I teach them the etiquette and things like that. But I says, listen, nobody is concerned about your game when they're playing with you. They're concerned about their game. They're not driving home that day going, oh, boy, that poor guy, he did this on the first hole, and then I saw him do this on – no, they're not concerned about your game. As long as you got course etiquette, you're courteous, you leave the course in better shape than when you found it, you don't step in their lines, and you do that. People just want to go out and play. So, yeah, you got to go out and play. You can't be chasing after a look of a Rory McIlroy who's been doing this since he was 2 years old. It's a pipe dream.
Yeah, well said. Tony, I want to take this on a little bit of a different spin for you, if you don't mind. Obviously, I think that the two before you have covered it quite nicely. But how do we change the mindset of some of the amateurs out there to get them not to be so worried about what everybody else is going to think about their swing? And as Lloyd just pointed out, people are not looking over their shoulder and say, gosh, did you see the guy behind me? I mean, occasionally, somebody whiffs a shot or hits a big old slice 2 fairways over. Of course, people are going to take notice. But for the most part, people are, as Lloyd said, are focused on their own game. But there's a mindset out there with a lot of amateurs that they're trying to look for the holy grail of golf swings, and it just really does not exist. How do we change that mindset? What do we do to convince people that, hey, get out there, as Clint says, get out there and play and work on the fundamentals that you've been taught, but not to the point where you're actually sort of having a reverse effect and sort of crippling yourself.
Sure, and that's one of the art forms of learning how to score in this game. Well, I think the panel before me said it perfectly. I think it just starts with education, especially from the teaching professional to the students. I'm guilty of this too. Sometimes I don't educate them on what they need to expect, and us as humans have a little bit too much of expectations upon ourselves, especially in this game of golf. And the game of golf is just, there's so many things that are outside of your control. And perfection is no such thing as golf. Just like life, you can't perfect life, you can't perfect golf. So,
right.
Most of my come up to me and they say, hey, did you see so-and-so on TV, and I want to be like him, blah, blah, blah. What I end up telling them is that, look, you're watching the best 1,000 golfers on this planet. Out of how many hundreds of millions of golfers are you watching 1,000 of them? Plus, you're watching the guys that made the cut. Plus, you're watching the guys that are leading. So you're watching the best 1,000,
sure.
best of 1,000 at that time. Sure, they're going to make more putts. Sure, they're going to hit more fairways. But have you actually gone and watched these guys on a regular basis? They hit it sideways just like you and I do. So just getting them across the point that they need to understand that golf is not a game of good shots. It's a game of good misses. How well can you miss the ball so it's in play? And my goal with them is to instruct them of that and provide them with a move based on their body type and their body build. We're not trying to invent more Rory McIlroys out there. It's impossible. We shouldn't be setting ourselves up for that. We should be inventing golfers of their ability, playing within their shop. And I know Clint's going to agree with me 100%. Spend more time on the putting green in the short game because that's where it really matters. So
absolutely,
educating them, educating the ideology of perfection does not exist in golf, and we shouldn't treat it for perfection. And yes, it can be a detriment to yourself because all of a sudden you become very robotic, searching for that perfect shot. And it goes all the way back to Ben Hogan. You ask Ben Hogan when he finished his round of golf, how many perfect shots did he hit? He would say 1 to 2. You ask any amateur how many perfect shots they hit, they would say 1 to 2. So why are we focusing on 1 to 2s when we should be focusing on how well do I miss the rest of my other shots?
Right, exactly. Yep. Clint, I think Tony took that out of the Clint Wright playbook.
He did, but I tell you, it's phenomenal. If I add something to that, is that if you watch the women, we talked briefly before on the air about the women's championship, and if you watch the last couple of holes, I was channeling the third shot program to these girls. I'm telling you.
Yep.
they won that golf tournament with the third shot.
Yep.
That up and in. But, one of the things that we do, and they're both correct, is that there's such a misperception of the amateur players of how the tour players or even the top collegiate players actually play.
Right.
And I sit down with my guys sometimes and say, okay, here's how they play. They hit 60% of the greens. They do this. They do that. And it's phenomenal. You guys can check this out. Both on the ladies' tour, the men's tour, and the collegiate tour, the numbers on number over par on the par 3s, par 4s, and par 5s are almost identical.
Yeah.
They play the par 3s a little bit over par, the par 4s a little bit over par, and they all make a living on the par 5s.
Yep.
It's phenomenal. And if you ask the average player, and I know these guys do the same thing, how do the tour players play? I actually now have gone to the point to asking my students, you want to play like Jason Day? And every one of them go, yeah. I said, well, here's how he plays. You know, he leads one category to Players' Championship and wins by 4 shots. Can you tell me which one it was? They don't.
Right.
They don't know. It was scrambling.
Yeah.
It wasn't greens in regulation. It wasn't fairways hit. It wasn't the least number of putts. It was how close he pitched the ball to the hole.
Right.
Yeah,
and
you know, and that
4.
Right, and that raises an interesting point too, Clint. Is if you look at Tiger's career, you know, especially
he
when
hit it everywhere.
Yeah, he hit it everywhere. I mean, he had a lot of wayward shots. I mean, he could certainly hit it a mile when he connected, and certainly he did hit some great shots down the fairway. But there were a lot of his early tournaments that he won where he was hitting out of the left rough, the right rough, from behind trees. But it was his recovery that really kept him in the game. And if he didn't have that ability to do that,
right,
you know, he would not have been the number one player for as long as he had. And you're exactly right. This sort of rolls, and Tony kind of led me into this a little bit, but brings me to the next sort of question, if you will, is, you know, listening to our students is obviously a courtesy, is a given. But it's important. Why is it important? And Lloyd, I'm going to talk to you first, and then we'll go to Tony, and then to Clint last. Obviously, it's a courtesy to listen to our students, but why is it important that we listen to what they have to say? What are, again, sort of some of the dangers as professionals if we're not really paying attention to what the students are telling us?
Well, you know, I'm a firm believer that how they perceive the golf swing, if we're just talking about now just the technical aspects of the golf swing itself, not necessarily playing the game, but how they perceive it is what they're going to try to do. You know, how the mind moves the body. And if the mind thinks that I got to hit a ball, you know, and when I hit the ball, the swing is, you know, blah, 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 well, that's what they're going to try to do. And their body is going to try to get them to do it because the mind perceives it that way. So I always like to talk to one of the best things that I've learned this year, that I've done with my students this year, especially individual lessons that I've got with people, is I ask them, I say, I'm going to take a swing here, and I'll purposely take, a slice or a big hook or something like that. And I say, now you give me the lesson. What did I do there? You know, I'm a firm believer in getting my students to the point that they don't ever need me again, other than when they want a tune-up, they want something that's going a little array, or, hey, let's do some short game stuff, let's do some sand stuff, things like that. But I want them to have a complete understanding of what it is that they are trying to do, and when the wheels fall off, what it is that they should be looking for. So when I ask them, I said, okay, what did I do on that swing? I want them to give me not a half-hour lesson. I just want them to give me a little bit of a lesson saying, oh, well, you know what? Your club got a little outside your hand. You came a little outside in. And so I saw your ball flight, and you had a slice there, so we know your path was blah, blah, blah. I want them to do that. So, yeah, a student is going to do whatever they perceive they should be doing. So having them talk about it is real important.
Right, and that's certainly, I agree with that 100%, certainly one aspect of it. But Tony, one of the other things too, I think why it's extremely important as a coach or a teaching professional that we have to listen to the students is one of the criticisms that I've heard within the industry is that sometimes the pros will try to impose what they feel the student should be doing, regardless of whether it fits that particular individual's style or game. In other words, if somebody's working with a specific theory or approach, and if they're not really listening to what the student's saying to them, a lot of times they're imposing, their own theory, if you will, without really understanding the student's problems. Is that a problem that you see as well? And again, the importance of listening.
Sure, and I couldn't agree with you more. I look at this as a relationship just like any relationship should be. Although I'm not the best relationship personally with my personal life, I do try and make up for it in my golf.
Hey, welcome to the club, Tom.
But I just go ahead and I let them talk because I want to listen to where they're coming from, their mindset. They might not see what I see, and I want to see how they visualize the shot. I want to see, do they internalize things? Do they think about stuff? Are they homeschooled? Like, do they watch a lot of YouTube videos? Are they misdiagnosing themselves? And this is that whole communication process. And I do my students a favor, and I really talk to them, and I explain, as soon as I meet you, look, I'm not going to change your golf swing without your permission because you are the one in control, right? I'm just here to help you. When I'm gone, I only see you once a week for 30 to 45 minutes, maybe an hour. And that's not even a full hour lesson, but I only see you once a week, so you're by yourself the rest of the time.
Right.
Now, I have to figure out how can I make this work based on the way you feel. And I'm almost trying to interview the devil because when I'm alone, when they're alone by themselves, away from me, that's where the devil creeps in, right? That's where thinking about other stuff. That's when their friends come along and say, oh, no, he's strengthening the wrong reason, and then I try and create that communication because they have to trust me and they have to trust that I'm guiding them in the correct lane, or else there's A, no trust, and B, that there's no communication. And I think the problem with, I'm not going to say a majority of the teaching professionals, but some of the ones that I've listened to, there is absolutely no communication, and it's almost like they're doing the student a favor by actually letting them take a lesson from them. So I think that's where we all need to start addressing this. We all need to communicate. The ideology of teaching is changed, and we went over this a month ago in our last roundtable event, where we know it's no longer about just teaching you how to cure a slice, or cure a hook. It's about getting involved in the person's life.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well said. And Clint, I know that there's really not a lot of wiggle room here. I mean, they two have pretty much summed up, I think, from that. But any thoughts that you want to throw in there as well?
Yeah. There's I guess the simple approach is that you have, it's their money, their time.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I always I look at it this way. I'll ask the student, what do you think's wrong? Why are you paying me money to help you right now? What do you want to do? What do you think is wrong? What can I help you improve? And then, we put them on video and either disprove their idea or we both buy into the same thing. See, so it's my job to either buy into what they think is wrong and agree with them and then come up with solutions to fix it, or it's my job to say, look, I'm not so sure that that's what you're doing, and here's the evidence. So I have to talk with them and have a conversation, either to agree with them and map out a plan for improvement, or I have to have a conversation with them to prove that they're not really right. We need to go down this other path if we really want to get better.
Right.
Yeah.
So to me, it's about buy-in. It's either buy into what they know is wrong or convince them that you're right and they need to buy into what you think is wrong. And that carries a needed conversation.
Right, and that raises, again, an interesting point because you're right, Clint, a lot of students out there that try to do a self-diagnosis come up with what they feel is the problem, and until you've actually sort of taken a good look and put it on video and then shown them, because we obviously, our eyes look forward, we can't see above us and as far as what we're doing. So until we actually see ourselves on video or some device like that, it's difficult to really be able to analyze. And it goes back to what Lloyd was saying. Obviously one of the objectives is we want to be able to help them sort of do a self-diagnosis. I mean, we certainly don't want to take away from business, but at the same time, they understand why they're getting the reactions or the results that they're getting is going to better help them in the long run to be able to work through some of the problems. In other words, we're simply giving them a tool to handle their problem solving, making their problem solving skills a little bit better. Let's go on. Next question I want to ask you guys, and I was sort of leading to this a little bit off air. We've obviously got some funky swings out on the tour over the years. Lee Trevino, Jim Furyk, and there's a host of others that have had some less than what we'd classify by today's standards the perfect swing, even though it really doesn't exist. How do we get students, Clint, I'm going to start back with you, even though I know you just finished. How do we get students to accept the quirks in their swings? how do we get them to sort of realize that, hey, you may not have the picture-perfect swing by today's standards, but that doesn't mean you can't make it work. How do we, again, wrap their mind around that?
Well, the main tenet, and we go, not to do any advertising here, but the R3 approach, the main tenet of that approach is to take what you've got today and make it work.
Right.
Okay, whatever it is. And that's what the Jim Furyk's and the Lee Trevinos and the Bruce Litsky's and the, Tony Penn, they all just took what they had and made it work. So I tend, if you have a person like that, there's just kind of, that's what they're going to do. They're not physically capable of doing anything other than that. I think you sit down with them. Now, I haven't done a lot of this because I really haven't had that much experience with that quirky swing that you just had to, to close your eyes and bite your tongue and hope you could teach them to chip putt, But, I haven't had that much experience. But I think you just sit them down and show that, hey, look at all of these odd swings here. And these guys have made millions of dollars with this ugly thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
True.
So let's take what you've got. There's all kind of stories, but the Tommy Armour story about watching the guy shank the ball 30 times and just tell him to groove what you got, Harold. Just groove what you got. There's something to that. But you got to get them to buy into it. You got to prove to them, hey, look, this is okay. The players have to come to at some point to accept the fact that that's the way they're going to swing. Now let's go on over here and learn how to get it in the hole.
Right, exactly. I mean, how you arrive at your destination, for lack of better words, it really is irrelevant. It's arriving there in the least amount of strokes as possible is really what the objective is. And so, whether you put a big old bend on the ball or duck hook your way down the fairway, if it gets in the hole and you get a par or better, then you're sitting pretty. And that's what I've always said to people as well. I'll get people come and say, "Gosh, I got this big old, chicken wing," and I say, "Well, let's take a look." And there's certain situations where you do have to make some corrections if it's impeding their ability to make good contact with the ball. Of course, you have to do that. But if their arms, flapping but the ball's going 150 yards down the fairway straight, then I'm not going to make a lot of changes. Because most people don't want to, especially as they get older, most people at that point when they start getting in their 40s, 50s, and beyond, they don't want to reconstruct or reinvent the wheel. So, why dissect somebody's swing to a point? Now, if they want to play, at a much higher competitiveness, then certainly there might be some adjustments that need to be made. But if it's working for them, I say have at it. I'm going to roll into the next questions because it kind of goes hand in hand with this. Lloyd, I'm going to go with you next. How do we get them to adjust to some of these physical limitations? What do we do? We can, as we just talked about here, we can sort of let them deal with it. But what do we do if they've got physical limitations? And I'm not referring to a physical handicap. I'm just saying that they've got limitations. Maybe they don't, can't swing the club all the way back. Mm-hmm. How do we make adjustments?
Well, and everything that we've all been talking about here varies a lot with the type of player you're dealing with. Whether you're dealing with a beginner, whether you're dealing with, somebody that's a high school player, whether you're dealing with somebody that's a woman that's in her late 50s, mid 50s. She's going to retire to Florida with her husband, wants to learn how to play golf. She's never done an athletic thing in her life. So all this stuff is going to be adjusted, depending on the person. Now, as far as people with physical limitations, I deal with a lot of beginners. I'm at one of the busiest driving ranges in America. I'm downtown Chicago, actually. I'm sitting in the parking lot right now. I get a lot of people here. I get a lot of young urban professionals that are taking their first big job, and they want to go on golf outings because their financial firm they're working for has golf outings, and I get a lot of older people that are going to retire down to Florida and they want to learn how to play golf, and I get these women that want to play golf with their girlfriends. You have to make some adjustments, and all the teacher professionals that I know that I really associate with, we've all got a lot of tools in our bag. I'm not going to work with a again, we'll go back to that 50-year-old woman, 60-year-old woman, who has, never done an athletic thing in her life, maybe a tad overweight, or the guy is tad overweight or whatever, and I'm not going to try to get them to be in positions like like a Jamie Slikowski.
Right.
I'm going to say, hey, let's get your weight forward on your left foot there. We're going to put a little stack and tilt into you. Those arms back there, keep your weight there. Let's go like that. So it varies with the person that you're with as far as what are they going to be able to do because of their body structures. It's just that's the whole key to teaching. And I've had this conversation with a lot of guys, Joe Mayo, a few other people, and all that stuff. And you sit there and you say, you get these people on the forums who have never taught in their lives or very rarely ever do any lessons, and they're sitting there criticizing golf instructors. And I tell people, I says, until you've done 1,000 lessons with 1,000 different body styles, 1,000 different minds, 1,000 different ages, I don't want to talk to you about what I should be doing in golf instruction, because every day you're sitting there on the range, and the person that shows up, you may never have seen this person before, is completely different than the person you just got done working with 15 minutes ago, 20 minutes ago. So you have to be able to adapt your teaching style. You have to have a lot of tools in your bag, and you have to be able to pull those tools out for that person and maybe not use those tools for somebody else. Right.
Well said. Tony, before I get to you, it reminds me of kind of a humorous story. I have a friend of mine that used to work at one of the Ford plants, and along the same lines, they used to get a lot of the and again, let me just preface this, I don't want to say that I'm knocking education, but they would get a lot of young guns, if you will, that would come fresh out of college and put them into a supervisory role and put them in front of some of these older seasoned guys on the line.
Yeah.
That had 20, 30 years experience on how the line actually works. And these guys are all coming in with all these different theories of what should be done and how to do it. And it's the same principle there. And again, I'm not knocking somebody's suggestion, but you're exactly right. I mean, until you've sort of walked the walk, be careful of, what you're talking about. And you're exactly right. Tony, just to sort of add on to what both Clint and Lloyd were talking about here, obviously, there are a lot of different swings out there, a lot of different styles. Everybody, has different physical limitations. Lloyd raised a very interesting point. Rather than trying to alter and reinvent the wheel with a student that maybe has some different challenges, he's willing to adapt and make some modest changes in order to help them achieve the same goal. Is that sort of along the lines of the thinking that you feel as well?
Sure. I have a quote that I tell all my students, and I think I'm going to turn it into a bumper sticker. The quote is, it's not a postcard, but it's a scorecard. So it doesn't matter how it looks, right? It doesn't matter where the ball goes, as long as it's functional and repeatable. Now, the problem is those two last words, functional and repeatable, most people don't have that. So how can I take what they do and make it a little bit more functional with less work and create more power? And that's probably because people don't use their bodies as much. So we just do some basic stretching, basic work, teaching them, instructing them, helping them educate themselves on what creates the power in their golf swing. How do they promote that power? How do they, again, create those good misses? It's not about those great shots again. And it's just, like I said, it's education, keeping things simple, explaining that it's all about club face. Very little is path anymore because of the glorious TrackMan that's helped us. I see this. So it's all about club face. Keep that club face square at impact. You can't really go wrong at that point. I don't care if you're coming outside to in or inside out. It's going to go pretty straight, and that's the goal. And I've been very fortunate to play around golf with Lee Trevino and Gary Player, who I would consider two of the better golfers of the previous two generations. And you take a look at their swings, they're still great ball strikers at their age. So it doesn't really matter about strength and flexibility. Obviously, we have Gary Player, who is very strong, very flexible. Lee Trevino, probably not the same type of build, but he still can actually strike the golf ball pretty well, and is in his mid-70s. So we just look at this. They're the result of the phenoms, right? And the problem is that the game has changed dramatically in the last 20 to 30 years, dramatically, where everybody had to adapt to this modern-day swing because that's what is the most repeatable. And you take a look at the body styles that morph into the most repeatable styles, they're all kind of the tall, lanky kids that come out. That's the only ones that can kind of swing this way. So we're training our students to say, well, this is why they need to swing this way. But that's not true. If you go back 25, 30 years ago, you could recognize anybody from the fairway because they all had their weird little swing that worked. But nowadays, it's hard to recognize anybody from the fairway because they all swing the same. So we just have to stay one move ahead, and it's all about that education, making sure we set up our students for success purely by education.
Well said. Speaking of which, going back 20 or 30 years ago, talk about tall and lanky. In his day, Al Geiberger was one that comes to mind. He was very, very tall, very thin, and had a very upright swing by today's standards. So that just goes to prove your point, Tony, is everybody's different. Right. We have to sort of adjust to the individual and not try to rope everybody into one form, if you will. All right, I want to ask a question of all of you, and Tony, I think I'm going to start with you this time, even though I know you just finished here, and then I'll go to Clint, and Lloyd, I'll let you wrap up this question. But the question is this, Tony: course attitude affects course results. Is that a true or false statement, and if so, why?
Absolutely. For the most part, I would think, I have a question I ask my students, say, which is more important out of 100%? Is it physical or mental? And most of the people say it's like 100% mental or 1,000% mental, whatever their response is. And I tell them, I think it's 100% mental and 100% physical. I know that doesn't add up, but if you take a look at what feeds what, the subconscious and the conscious feed the product of your being and your machine. So if you are thinking bad, you're going to swing bad. And when you swing bad, you're going to think bad. And it just keeps reflecting on each other, and all of a sudden you dig a deep hole, you spiral out of control. And it's very hard to come out of that. Once you're down there, it's really hard. But if you start thinking positive, you start reflecting that thoughts, and you start becoming more forgiving. And one of the things I do with my students is I go and play golf with them every so often, and instead of keeping score, they can keep score. I keep how many times I hear a negative thought about themselves. And most of the time, there's more negative thoughts than there were strokes. If they shoot 110, there's 150 negative thoughts, right? So, and I say, well, what's the correlation with that, right? The lower you shoot, the less negative thoughts. So let's just cut this down, and I guarantee you'll reflect it. So that's, short and sweet. That's pretty much the answer.
And you're exactly right. And I knew you were going to say that in your comment. I knew that you were going to mention that that their negative thoughts and comments would outweigh the strokes. Clint, course attitude affects course results. Would you agree?
Well,
and also,
does.
Let me just add in there just to sort of clarify something first that Tony had said about mental and physical. I agree with that. I think it's a combination of both, but I think you also have to factor in, which is slightly different, is the emotional aspect as well. Their emotional, and I think people have to understand that their emotion plays a big role. So go ahead, Clint. Your take on that?
You just stole my answer. But just for one point, Tony was making the point about the swings are all the same now. But isn't it strange that the scores haven't come down?
Absolutely. And you know why? Because it's the third shot, right?
Yeah, it's the third shot. There you go. I'm just, I'm just pounding the idea, guys. I'm just the only thing I got, okay? It's the only thing I got. No,
welcome to Clint's shameless plug of the R3.
That's the only thing I got. Hey, but honest to God, Tony's right. It's physical. Obviously, it's a physical. It's a mental game. But as far as on course, mental is just knowing where you're at and what you want to do. But the emotional side and emotional state of a player, it's obvious. You saw it just last night again. We come back to the ladies' deal. The emotions, nervousness is an emotion. It's not mental. It's an emotion. So if you can control your emotions, obviously then you can control the level of tension and all kind of different things through your body, which is going to make you swing smoother, easier, faster, or can't swing at all. So we always try to get a person to have the emotional swing. Whenever you hit a great shot, be excited about it, but bring it back to neutral as quick as you can. If you hit a bad shot, be upset about it if you want to be. If that's how you clear your mind, go ahead, but bring it back to neutral before you tee it up hit the next ball.
Right.
So I like the idea of let those emotions flow, but bring it back to neutral.
Yeah, I
before
agree
you hit
with that
next shot. You got to let it flow. You got to get excited, and sometimes getting a little angry with yourself might just kind of clear the air, and you can go on and play some golf.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And again, as Tony put it, 100% right, Clint, as always. And thank you for that shameless plug. I appreciate that. And I'm sure that the guys at the R3.
Hey, it's not a plug. It's all I got. I'm a simple-minded fellow.
Yeah, I know. Lloyd, just a quick wrap-up of that. I think the guys pretty much covered that. But anything you want to add on that?
Well, I agree with Tony as far as the emotion. It's an emotional game. We take a look back at the greatest golfers of all time, the Bobby Joneses, the Ben Hogans, Jack Nicklaus, he was the best at it. Tiger Woods has been one of the best at it, is they let it go. They shut the door. Like Nicklaus said, as soon as that hole is over with, I shut the door. That's in the past. And I try to get my students to get that type of being in the now. The past is the past. And the future hasn't happened. You have nothing. You can't control either one of those two. But what you can control is right now. And when you let your emotions get away from you, you've now taken away from your core strategy. You may not be thinking right. You may be saying, hey, you know what, I'm going to rip this driver down there, when you should have just taken a hybrid and kept it short of the water, or just things like that. So, letting your emotions get away with it takes away from the mental ability to play the course or play that hole that's being presented to you right now. That other stuff happened in the past. The future doesn't happen. The future never comes. So
right,
that's my
exactly.
thoughts.
Well said as well. Good answers, guys. Okay, this last question, there's actually several components to it, so we're going to have to really move on this just because of time, okay? But this one here, it talks about, and we've talked a little bit about the zone before, but I've got some specifics that I want to address on this, and this is sort of entitled Entering the Zone. And one of the first topics, and Clint, I'm going to start back with you if that's okay.
Okay. Sure.
High self-confidence is point number one. Obviously, being confident is important, but how does it play into entering the zone? How does self-confidence play in somebody that wants to sort of fall into that zone?
Well, I think a person that is going to, like I say, you want to play in the zone, you want to find that free-flowing attitude and golf swing, where you're in the now, like you're saying. I think that self-confidence, or almost a slight level of being a little cocky maybe, you have that level of expectations you're going to get in the zone. It's not that am I going to get in it today, you're expecting to be in it.
Right.
You go out there with a purpose of finding that zone, to get in it. I think that we've all had the case where you kind of fall into it, and have that phenomenal round of golf that you really don't know how you did it, but you did.
Yeah.
But I think the real players of this game fully expect to be there every time they go out to play.
Right.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Tiger's a perfect example of that. Tiger, every time he went out there, when he was in his heyday, boy, he expected to win. He didn't.
Yeah,
that was it. I'm going out there. I'm going to hit these shots. The shots that he's hit in his career are just phenomenal.
Yeah,
confidence to do it.
Yeah, and that
there was no level that it wasn't going to happen. This was going to happen.
Yeah. And that's really why he was had the confidence that he did, is because he knew what his abilities were. He knew what he could and couldn't do, and he stuck with what he knew he could do, and really, sort of shelved what he knew he couldn't do, which wasn't really a lot, but I'm sure there were a few things in there. But Lloyd, I'm going to move to number 2 on you because I don't want to get repetitive with this. Number 2 is immersing yourself in the task. So obviously, that's the ability to obviously be able to focus on a task necessary for peak performance. You're on that shot. Again, to be in the zone, you've got to be able to focus on the task at hand. How important is that?
Right. Oh, it's extremely important, and it goes back to what we were talking about. The question before this is that to have a clear mind to look. We could put a ball, 20 yards or 20 feet away from a green in the rough, and have Phil Mickelson, Jack Nicklaus, Ben Hogan, and Tiger Woods hit a shot, and all four of them may hit a completely different shot with different trajectory and a different club. And so when you have that shot ahead of you, you have to have a clear mind so you can make the right decisions. And the right decision may be, hey, listen, I'm gonna have a mid-flight trajectory for this little pitch shot, or I'm gonna bump and run this sucker up there. And so having the task at hand and being in the now, being in the present, allows you to think clearly of your different options that you have. There are so many different options in the short game. When you're around the green or anywhere. I mean, even in the trees, you may have an option of a high fade versus a low little draw through the trees. So being in the moment and being clear-minded so you can go through all your different options. And it goes back to what we first started talking about. The very first question is, until you go out and play all the time, I mean, you can play one hole 1,000 times and never play it the exact same way in 1,000 different ways. Right. And so until you have all these different little memories or feelings or pictures in your head of what you've done in the past, you're losing out on different ideas. And so it goes back to even with Fred Schumacher, in his book about extraordinary golf is there's an art form. There's an art form to this, and to get yourself to look at different options that you have available. And if your mind is wandering or you're still worried about the last hole, you don't see those options.
Right. Well said. Tony, and this brings us right to point number 3, which is narrow focus of attention. And there's really a narrow focus as well as a broad focus. Narrow being obviously, the task at hand, maybe a specific hole, and obviously a more broad focus might be, as an example, various pieces of information that help make up your decision, like club selection. Maybe there's wind factoring in there. Narrow focus of attention, the importance of that, Tony?
Sure. It kind of goes back to the whole theme of narrow your focus in entirety. I mean, you have to trust your body. You have to trust all the work that you've put into it. And the more you can focus on the actual target at hand and task at hand, the less you'll focus on your body. And I've probably been fortunate to play in the zone a couple of times in my life, and people ask me, how did that go? And I says, I don't remember. I don't remember much from around because you're just like walking on a cloud. And my intention is to hit a target. Golf is target oriented. So the smaller that target can become, the more you focus on that target, and the more you just trust your body's instinct to get the ball to the target naturally, based on all the input that you put into your body, like a little computer. So there's a great story for Wilshire Country Club, which I got to play a couple of times, and I believe it was the 12th or 13th hole. And one of the caddies was like, "You see that Hollywood sign over there?" And you just got to aim for the Hollywood sign. And we started talking about. A caddy of Ben Hogan said the exact same thing to Mr. Hogan and said, "Mr. Hogan, see that Hollywood sign on the back? Just aim for the Hollywood sign." And it's small anyway. And Mr. Hogan said, "Well, which letter?" So he was he's like, "Well, which letter do you want me to aim at?" So I tell my students, I'm looking at a leaf on a tree about 400 yards away, and they're looking at me like I'm crazy. It's like, well, I'm trying to pinpoint to the leaf because when I miss the leaf, if I miss it 3 leaves over, it's a lot of difference than missing it 3 trees over. So that's the ideology for me, really trying to specify the details, because then it just leaves your body to be free to just do what it has based on all the input that you put into it.
Great answer. I like that. Clint, we're back to you. Number 4, of course, is, and I know you'll be good on this one, automatic and effortless execution. Boy, don't we all want that. We want to be in the zone. We want it to feel effortless in the execution of our shots, but also we want it to be automatic, and that's really what we strive for.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and it's difficult for a person that's when you're working with somebody, particularly at this level of what you're talking about. You're beyond the beginner. You're into more of the elite player, and so. I've always related that attitude about trying to teach somebody how to ride a bicycle. You can't teach somebody how to ride a bicycle. They have to experience it. You can help them learn how. But they've got to feel the movement and the balance, and golf is a lot like that. And one of the techniques that I use to help them get that feel is I ask them to make as easy a golf swing as they can make, usually with an 8-iron, and most of the time it goes about 110 yards. And I ask them, I say, well, where did that yardage come from? Nobody ever knows. But I say, what if we drop a ball on the sidewalk? What's it going to do? Well, it'll bounce. Well, where'd the bounce come from? All kind of answers. But the bounce was built into the ball.
Right.
And so's that 110 yards. So if you want to hit your 8-iron 150 yards and you got 110 built in, how much do you as a player have to contribute? 40 yards, obviously.
Right.
So I get them to try to feel adding 40 yards. Not swinging for the 150, just swing for the 40 yards. And then they can maybe get a feel for that, because it's complicated and obviously difficult for a player to stay on that, because they get anxious and want to hit it harder, get it quicker, whatever. But those little techniques I've always found was a way of helping a person experience what that effortless swing felt like, that would, and they hit that first one out there and it goes 145, 50 yards, you go, wow, I didn't expect it to go that far.
Yeah, I didn't know I had it in me.
Yeah. I mean, all they got to add is 40 yards.
Yep.
Yeah, and that makes it so much simpler too if you put it in that perspective, Clint, because it alleviates a lot of the pressure on the player.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, that's why we pay $400, $500 for a driver. Isn't it supposed to sling it out there for you?
Yep.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. About 200 yards of it, then the rest of it's on you, right?
I'll take 200 and I'll put 100 in. I can buy that.
Yeah,
I'll buy that.
That's exactly right. Number 5, obviously, we talked about this emotional control, and I don't think we need to bring that one again, but that would be number 5. Number 6, of course, and I'll let you guys just sort of have at it, but enjoyment. We want to have, when you're out there, whether you're out of the zone, it doesn't really matter. We want people to have fun, and I think really the only way to be able to do that is to really sort of leave the baggage, if you will, other than the bag that's carrying your club, back at the clubhouse. I think too many people take their anxieties, the stresses of the day, the stresses of from the last round. I think, as Tony had mentioned earlier, a bad hole or a couple of holes, and bring it with them through the rest of the round. And I think go out there and have fun. First and foremost, have fun out in the golf course. Whether you hit a big old slice every other shot really is irrelevant. There's a time and a place to work on those things, and it's not on the golf course, it's on the tee. So that would be my sort of take on enjoyment. Anybody else want to chime in?
Yeah, let me chime in a little bit on this. And I learned this from actually, again, Fred Schumacher years and years ago. And one of the things that I do with some of my students, I'll have them fill out on a piece of paper, and I'll say, why do you play golf? Why do you what is it that you're looking for in these lessons and all that? And with a lot of the men, you'll get all these very aggressive answers. Oh, I want to beat my best buddy. Oh, I want to, my boss. I want to beat my boss. I want to hit it 300 yards. I want to do this and all that. And then I'll have them say, what is it that you like about playing golf? And then you get all these other different answers. I love being out in nature. I love the walk. I love the exercise. I like being with my buddy and talking for 4 hours. I love spending time with my husband for 9 holes. It's the only time we ever get the chance to talk. And so you look at the two different things and you say, what is the reason why you're playing golf? Is because you enjoy it. Okay? The other parts of it are just are things that really don't add to your enjoyment of it. Now, are you going to enjoy beating your best buddy? Sure. But why are you out there with your best buddy? You're not out there necessarily to beat him. You're out there because he's your best buddy.
Right.
And so I think when students start to really take a look at that and say, you do a walk with them right at daybreak, right when the sun's coming up, and you pick out a beautiful hole and you have them meet you there, and you just walk that hole. And you walk with them and you show them, look at the shadows. Look at how the sun is just rising over the mound by the hole back there, or golf in Chicago in the fall when the shadows are out and the leaves are all changing colors, and the beauty of the golf course, and you just walk with them and say, this is what golf is about here. This is what it's about. And if you're going to ruin this 4-hour walk, like John Feinstein says in his book, but if you're going to ruin this 4-hour walk being angry or being and not appreciating this, then you're really not playing golf. You're playing some other game that I don't really know, But once you start to become part of the nature, and I don't want to get too Zen-like, but once you start becoming part of the golf course and start enjoying it, then when you hit that funny shot, you laugh about it and you go, wow, I've never been over here. Wow, this is a great view from the trees. I've never been in these trees before. I've never noticed how the view of this green looks so good over here.
Right.
So that's my take on it.
Exactly. The last one, of course, is a clear mind, and I think that's self-explanatory. I mean, you want to have a clear picture of what it is that you want to do and how you're going to go about doing it. And that's really what you guys are for, and I'm for out there to help these people to formulate a game plan, if you will, and then let them go out and execute that plan. I'm going to just give you guys a quick moment here just to let everybody know how they can reach out to you if they want to. And Tony, I'm going to let you, since you're newer to the panel and that, I'm going to give you an opportunity to let the folks know where they can reach out to you if they want.
Sure. If you want to email me, it's tonyb@pgalearningcenters.com. We just opened our 14th site nationwide, and we're looking to open many more. If they need more information on where they can access one of these sites, it's pgalearningcenters.com.
Perfect. And what you got? Lots cooking in the next few weeks. What's happening? You just opened one, didn't you? Just open a PGA Learning Center here recently? I think you said the last time you were on.
Yeah, we opened 7 of them in Texas, Denver, and so we're continually opening them. I think we're still in our trial phase. This is the last year of our trial phase, but it looks like it's picking up and going, so we expect to have over 100 by the end of next year.
Wow. Well, that's fantastic. Lloyd, how about yourself? Where can folks reach out?
Yeah, my personal website, which is still in construction, but it's there, is lloydhigley.golf.com. You can also find me at Chicagoland Golf Academy, ChicagolandGolfAcademy.com. And my email is just lloydhigley@gmail.com.
Perfect. Are you working on a quick thing before, Clint, I let you wrap it up? Lloyd, are you working on your site yourself, or have you got somebody?
No, I've got somebody.
Okay.
Yep.
I was just curious.
Yep.
Clint, how can the folks reach out to you?
Just like we always have, they can send me an email to, same old stuff, guys. ClintGolf001 @yahoo.com. I'd be more than happy to hear from anybody and encourage, it's getting summertime. Get out and play some golf, take a kid with you.
Yep.
Yeah, and watch the highlights from this past NCAA Women's Championship. I'm sure they'll be playing that again on the Golf Channel. You want to see some great action.
Phenomenal.
Yeah,
and the guys
it was.
The guys are coming up tomorrow.
That's right. So it'll be good just in time for Memorial Weekend. Guys, as always, very appreciative of you giving of your time. Thank you for joining me tonight on the Coach's Corner panel. I had a good time. I enjoyed it. And again, thank you as always for giving of your time, and have a great Memorial Weekend. Everybody have a safe and happy holiday.
Yep. You too, guys. Thanks, guys.
You as well.
Thank
See
you.
ya.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. That was my very special guests on the Coach's Corner panel, Clint Wright, Lloyd Higley, and Anthony Brooks. And I believe I just cut off my next guest. I apologize. John Hughes is going to be joining me here, and I think he was actually waiting in the wings, and I think I accidentally cut him off. So, John, I'm sure if you're tuning in, I'll watch for you to come back on. But great discussion tonight. I wanted to, cover some areas that really we don't talk about too much, and here's John. I have to apologize when he comes on air here, but always try to mix it up on the Coach's Corner panel, and had a great discussion tonight. But we're going to continue the discussion. Actually, with a regular has been on the show many, many times. I think he and Clint are in battle for who's been on the most number of times. Of course, I'm talking about my good friend John Hughes, and he's a PGA Master Professional. He's also the Vice President of the North Florida PGA Section and the recipient of the 2013 PGA of America Horton Smith Award, as well as recognized as one of the top 30 instructors by Golf Tips magazine. My good friend and hopefully still friend, I apologize for cutting you off, John. Welcome with me, Mr. John Hughes. John. Hey, John, how are you?
Ted. Yeah. It happens, no problem.
It's my old age, I think. It's creeping up on me. My apologies. John, I wanted to have you back on, separate from the panel. I mean, you're on usually at least once a month on the panel discussions. I always appreciate your thoughts and input into the discussions. But I wanted to have you on separately for a reason. You obviously, as we've talked about in private conversations, obviously have a wealth of information and of knowledge about the game. You've been around the business for what, 30 plus years, I believe. And you just somebody that I feel that the listeners can benefit from your knowledge, and I enjoy listening to as well. And when we talked actually here just recently, in fact last night we talked for a little bit. There were a couple things that we're going to discuss here tonight. And the first one, we're going to talk about something that you've been working on here for the last little bit called the GRIP Project. First off, tell us a little bit, what is the GRIP Project? How did you sort of come together with that thought and idea? And then some of the things that you're doing with it.
Well, thanks for the compliments. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the opportunity to spend an hour. I think we did this back in October, November during Coach's Corner when some people had some things pop up late, and we had a really good Coach's Corner. So I'm looking forward to this evening with this. I had mentioned back last year I was working on what I call the GRIP Project, and what it basically boils down to is golf instructors for the general public, for your general public's knowledge. Golf instructors go through schools, at least through the PGA they do, and some of the other organizations that certify golf professionals. And a lot of the things we're taught for a long time weren't necessarily scientifically based. And one of those, at least in my mind, was grip size and what grip size does and doesn't do to the particular ball flight or swing dynamics. So last year, just more as a, let me get out and expose myself and see what I can learn, number one. Number two, see what I can validate with some partners. And then three, not necessarily demystify or prove something wrong or right, but just try to put some two and two together. For lack of a better way of saying it, I decided let's go out and test what grips actually do. So I went to two of my partners, Golf Pride, Charlie Fisher, who's the National Distribution Manager for Golf Pride Eaton, and several people, including Henry Johnson, the CEO and inventor of FlightScope, got behind this with me, as well as Cobra Golf supplied some demo clubs, I guess is the best way to put it. And what I did was decide, okay, what do I want to test and how do I want to go about testing it? And last summer I decided the easiest thing to do is let's just test jumbo grips. It seemed to be they're all in vogue, whether it's putters or Jumbo Max with DeChambeau now, who uses those. So it was sort of all coming into play, and I decided let's go out and see what this will do. So I came up with some criteria, obviously not scientifically foolproof because there's some variables I just was not prepared to take care of, such as slipping grips on and off someone's clubs.
Yeah.
Had about 100 participants in this. It was really easy. Hit 10 shots with your 7-iron. Let me find a Cobra club that most closely resembles the club that you hit with a jumbo grip on it, and let's hit 10 shots. And we're going to let FlightScope do the work for us and give us subjective feedback. And did that throughout the summer and came up with some interesting yet not scientifically proven conclusions, I guess is the best way to say it. FlightScope isn't necessarily willing to jump on board with the conclusions yet. And our plan over a 5-year period is to get all the variables ironed out so we can be more conclusive about this. The grip manufacturers do this type of research, but they don't release it for a lot of proprietary reasons other than what the general public would think. It probably has more to do with compounds and structures and how fibers are put together, not necessarily the size of the grip. So they'll do this type of testing in their own testing facility but never release this info. So that's where I got Charlie's blessing from Golf Pride to say, go out and find out what you can find out. And it was a lot of fun. It took place between the 1st of June and the 15th of September last year, various different places in the Florida area, as well as South Carolina and North Carolina. I tried to get a good cross-section of people and found out some interesting things.
What were some of the findings that you came with so far? I mean, I know you're still going through the project, if you will, but what were some of the findings that you found of interest that maybe not really debunk, but sort of go against what the general thinking is?
Right, and I'm not trying to play mythbusters here so much as it was more let me confirm what I was always taught X amount of years ago. And I'm going to speak in generalities. I don't want anyone in the audience to feel like, hey, this is whatever he says is gold and I got to go do it. Because even though I have a decent cross-section, it's still not of scientific evidence yet. And I'm going to repeat this later on. But in a nutshell, in a general nutshell, if you're a male golfer, 15 handicap, a female golfer, 20 handicap, or worse, by placing a jumbo grip in somebody's hand, it actually, on average, increased the yardage. Someone hit a 7-iron, male about 8 yards, a female about 4.5. But more importantly to me, I saw what I call the cone of dispersion, that angle in which your far rights are going to go right and your far lefts are going to go left. If you imagine that as a pie, a piece of pie, that angle reduced itself. It's called a variance, and that variance came down by as much as 18%. So what that really meant was 15 or worse, you're going to hit it longer simply because you're going to be more accurate. You're taking curvature out of the ball. You're potentially hitting it more on the sweet spot. Those numbers weren't quite as conclusive as the yardage and the variance, and that's where the more scientific study needs to take place in the future. With your 14 to, say, 10, there was some increase in yardage, but that variance left to right got even tighter again. And then from a single digit and on down, what I sort of saw, I had 2 or 3 mini tour players, 1 PGA Tour player participate in this, a couple of Symetra Tour players, some good amateurs. Distance was negligible either way. If there was any kind of trend, maybe there was a little bit of loss. And arguably these people are already accurate, or they became even more accurate, which was pretty astonishing. And their variances are pretty tight to begin with. And the only conclusion I could make out of this, and I have to hand it to a friend of mine, Eric Alpenfels, he's the director of instruction at Pinehurst Resort, and he did a similar type of study 2000, 2001 in conjunction with Golf Magazine. And his one conclusive theory was grip size did not matter. It was the comfortability of the grip that mattered. And if someone could securely put the grip in their hands without over-tightening or being ultra-loose, that was going to provide the most optimal swing conditions and, in turn, ball flight conditions. Flight scope, TrackMan, that stuff wasn't out there at that point. So Eric, I consulted Eric with this, and he was sort of curious to hear what had to be done with this, and I've shared some of the findings, and it's pretty much along the same line that he saw. But seeing it number-wise from a deviation from that variance standpoint of view was sort of eye-opening. And what I've done with this going forward, and I will go on record by stating I'm a big alignment person, period. If you can't align yourself if you can't aim properly to a target, you can't hit the target, period.
Right.
And the numbers are there. The numbers are there scientifically through Flight Scope and TrackMan and the other ball flight radar and optical systems. So everybody's always said, the only connection you have, Hogan, Nicklaus, Palmer, I can go on and on and on, is the grip, and that's still true. But with alignment, your grip can change. But what's been neat about doing this project, this little research, is size does matter to a certain extent, but it only matters to the point of comfortability. After going through the test, I had a 10-question survey that each participant went through. And the ones that did not see any increase, whether they were an outlier or they were in that scrap, that single-digit handicap or better, they didn't really find comfort in that bigger grip. But when we did see a decrease in variance or deviation of the shot pattern, when we saw more distance gain, no matter how much more distance it was, everybody to a person said that the grip was much more comfortable. So there's some correlation there.
Let me ask you, with the participants, and I don't know whether this came up in the discussions or not. In addition to the physical differences, and let's take out the lower handicap players, because obviously there wasn't a big variance there, and understandably so. But with some of your participants that did see a noticeable, was in addition to comfort, because obviously with a smaller grip, especially if you've got larger hands, a lot of times players will feel that the club twist or turn within their hands. They're not getting like you say, they're not getting a comfortable grip on the grip, let's say. Was that something that you heard commented about at all from any of the participants, that they noticed with this larger grip that they weren't getting that same slippage?
To a certain extent, yes. And we did measure hand size and glove size as well as the current grip that they were playing on their golf club. So we had some comparison data to look at. And to a person, the bigger grip did seem to be more comfortable. They felt like they were using less tension. They were using less pressure. These were all new grips. So one of the variables that I would never be able to control is somebody coming with a dry rotted grip versus a brand new one. And there's obvious answers to those questions. I should have re-gripped 3 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever the case may be. But as far as hand size goes, and Ted, you probably do this as an instructor, you're constantly looking to give all your clients an edge somehow. So when you're looking at a bigger hand, it's pretty obvious. It's a no-brainer. Hey, let's get a little bit bigger grip in your hand. But it isn't necessarily always the case. Throughout the years that I've been trying to constantly learn, I had a friend in Hilton Head. He was 6'5", and his hands took up the entire grip area. His hands were massive, but he didn't use a big grip. He was able to literally spread his fingers out and control the entire length of the grip. And when he went to a bigger grip, because he was a better player, it's not necessarily he didn't see the rate of closure of the club head slow down or speed up. He just felt like he'd lost control of the golf club, that he wasn't gripping down hard with a normal size grip. He just felt like with a big grip, he didn't have full control over it. And then it works, most of the time it works the other way, where if you have a bigger hand, you put a little bit bigger grip in there, you don't have to have as tense or as tight as a grip. And that's the real key, as everybody should know that. And earlier, I was paying attention earlier in the show, and you were talking about being tension-free and so forth. Tension starts in the hands, period. If you were to stand just relaxed at your side and tense up a fist on one side of your body, left or right hand, you'll notice that tension radiate through your arm, into your shoulder, into your neck, and down your torso. That's what can prevent some of what golfers experience. So it wasn't surprising for me to see that bigger grips actually increased length not necessarily because of rate of closure or more solid impact, so much as their hands are less tense, and now they're able to move in synchronization, or at least as close as possible, to kinematic sequence to what this person can naturally do.
You know, it's interesting that just to add to what you were talking about a moment ago about the gentleman who had the larger hands. I had a similar situation a number of years ago with a gentleman quite tall. I mean, I'm 6'4", and I've got relatively big hands, but they're fairly thin. I don't have a lot of what I would classify as meat on my bones compared to some. So I don't have to. I certainly play with a little bit larger than a standard grip, but this particular gentleman that I am thinking about had very thick hands, not just fingers, but in the palms of his hands. And he actually played with fairly standard grips. And he said that one of the reasons he did was because when he closed his hands around the club, that extra padding, if you will, in his hands was able to give him a comfortable hold of the club. Whereas if he put a larger grip, it no longer. In other words, the club basically just fit in perfect in his hands. He was able to hold onto the club securely and be able to execute the shots the way he wanted to. So in that particular scenario, I didn't need to make any adjustments to the grips at all. He was, again, able to play with fairly standard grips. Now that obviously is not going to happen with everybody with larger hands. It just depends. So there's a lot of variables. It's not just the lengths of the fingers, some people might think, or the length of the hand, if you will. It's also the thickness of the hand as well, I think, makes a difference as well, correct?
Absolutely. And again, I want to reiterate sort of as not necessarily as a disclaimer so much as to have the audience understand that we're talking in generalities here, and if you feel like, hey, I am having a hard time holding on to the grip for whatever reason, it's worth experimentation to put a different size grip in your hand. And since I sort of leaned this way before I started this grip project, now I'm definitely leaning this way for a lot of other reasons. Mm-hmm. I'd rather see someone have a bigger grip in their hands if they're not necessarily a great player. If they're the weekend warrior, they're playing once or twice a month, they're just swinging out of their shoes, having a good time, which we all want to do. Those bigger grips tend to be easier and more comfortable on the hands to control the golf club with. And I've actually started implementing that with some people just so that the audience can understand. Pros experiment with grips as much as amateurs do.
Sure.
And they'll typically start with their wedges because they hit wedges more than any other golf club. So if they're going to experiment, if their grip partner that they represent has a new style or a new model or a new compound or what have you, they'll typically start one or two of those grips in the typical size that they have with their current grip, put it on a wedge. From there, they'll try it with driver because that's the second club in the bag they hit most often and arguably the most important for them. They've got to get it in play. If it works for the wedges, works for the driver, they may slip it on an iron that they hit a lot of approach shots with. And if it passes those three litmus tests, they have no problem switching. And that's a great model to follow for the amateur. You are hitting more wedges than you realize. And a lot of people are handsy with those wedges. More so in what I've seen because of two things. They're trying to be controlling, and because they're trying to be controlling, B, they just tense up on the grip. So that bigger grip actually frees them up to hit some of those more delicate shots or some of these more what I call romantic shots that a Mickelson or a Phil Rogers or a Hogan was able to do in his day. You have to be careful with it. It's not for everybody. But I would say in generality, you're 15 or worse, you got to look at it. You have to take a look at it. You have to go to the pro that you're taking instruction from, receiving coaching from, and say, you know what, I want to experiment with this. Do you have any laying around? Can I slip one on a club somewhere? I actually carry these clubs with me now. I always leave a couple in the trunk or in my teaching bag. And if I see somebody who's really, really handsy, getting a lot of grip tension, I'll throw that bigger grip in their hands and just say, just try it. Just try it. And I'd say 9 out of 10 times it does work. And I do get the feedback of, wow, that's more comfortable. I feel more controlled of the club with less tension. I don't feel like my hands are hurting anymore after playing golf. I mean, there's numbers and numbers of different comments that came back that what it all added up to was the more comfortable that grip is in your hands, the better.
Yeah, and also, too, I think it helps, a little bit with the shock absorption, too. Having the larger grips, I think, again, most amateurs, unfortunately, a lot of them will, pick up a set of clubs or something off the rack and not really make any adjustments to the grip. And as you know, most of the manufacturers put a very basic grip on most of the clubs. If you go to any of your retail outlets, like a Dick's Sporting Goods or something like that, or Academy Sports, and you hit a couple of bad shots, and you can feel it. Literally, you can feel it run up right at your arm. So obviously, I could see an advantage as well, John, with having these larger grips for some of the players that aren't as good around the course, giving them a little bit more comfort that way as well.
I'd agree that for the average person listening out there, there's two components of the golf club right now that are making the biggest technology advances in each of their technology generations, meaning every 6 months or so, sometimes every 4 months, shafts literally change and make big differences, not only for the tour players but potentially for the average player. The second component is the grip. You're seeing more and more manufacturers out there trying to fill in some niches everywhere. You see the bigger manufacturers, Golf Pride, who's a partner of mine, coming up with all sorts of new things. And then you see Super Stroke and all these, not necessarily one-offs, but let's just get into putting. Let's make a bigger grip for putting. And they've got 4 or 5 different sizes from small to gigantic, and their small is two times the size of what the grips used to be. So it's worth going out experimenting with grip simply because the technology to grips does change generationally much faster than, say, club head design or face. Those two things are regulated highly by the USGA. It's not that the shafts and the grips aren't. There's just a lot more room to grow in those two particular components of the golf club, which could produce performance for somebody. Yeah,
well said. John, I see we have waiting in the wings here to join us. One of the other parts of the conversation tonight, we want to talk about Game Golf and the great products that they have to offer. So let's bring on our other guest tonight that's going to be joining us from Game Golf. He's the Director of Channel Sales, Mike Hammond. So let's bring Mike on, and then we'll talk a little bit about that as well, okay?
Sure.
All right. Good evening, Mike, and welcome to Golf Talk.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm
glad
Mike,
that you were able to. How are you?
I'm doing well, John. Thank you.
Glad you're able to join us tonight. We appreciate you taking the time to do so tonight. Mike, let me just ask you very quickly, just for the benefit of the audience, maybe you can just kind of give a little bit of the history of Game Golf, what products you have, and a little bit of how it works, and then John, we'll get into some further discussion.
Absolutely. So Game Golf launched at the PGA show in 2014, in January 2014. The product has been in design for probably 6 years by John McGuire coming to the U.S. from Ireland. So essentially what you have is you have a device that you wear on your belt, and then you've got tags that go in each one of your clubs. And in that device, there's GPS, there's an accelerometer, gyroscope, and a compass. So basically what's happened is each tag that goes into the club is unique to the club. So the device knows, there's a driver tag in the driver, the 3-wood, the 5-iron, all the way down through your bag. So when the golfer goes out, we've mapped, over 38,000 golf courses around the world. So when the golfer steps on the tee and they tag, we're taking a GPS reading of where they are. So every time the golfer hits a shot, they tag, and we're taking a reading. We're recording what club's being hit, where it's being hit from, And on all these golf courses have been mapped, we draw fences around all the tees, all the fairways, all the greens, the sand traps. So not only we're recording shots being taken, we're recording if fairways were hit, if greens were hit in regulation, if you missed the green, if you scrambled and got up and down, if you had a par save. So we start tracking all this information. So after 5 rounds, if I'm tracking all this, I can come to John and say, okay, here's my information. Here's how far I'm hitting my driver. Here's my tendencies with my driver. Here's how many fairways I'm hitting. Here's how many greens I'm hitting. And probably the biggest eye-opener for me and should be for most of the average golfers that are on our platform is we don't hit the ball nearly as far as we think we do.
Right.
So after 10 rounds, I did some analysis on my game, and I was able to save an average of 6 shots per round just by hitting the right clubs, approaching the golf course in a different fashion. And that's before John tells me that I need to technically clear my hips or take the club further outside. So this is all just course management and understanding your game where you can see immediate results without making any changes or improvements in your swing. So
wow.
We launched the original product in January. In November of 2015, we came out with a Bluetooth device, so now I can actually have my Android phone or my iOS, and I turn on the phone, I turn on the device is Bluetooth, so now my round is being recorded on the device and being mirrored on my phone. Wow,
that's fantastic. It's incredible the technology that's out there now, and it obviously, John, like you were talking about a moment ago with the club heads and so forth, how fast it's changing. John, as a golf professional, a product like this that Game Golf is offering, how valuable is the information that they're able to gather through their devices to you as a coach and as a teaching professional? If you're working with a student that you've connected with this particular device, how valuable is that information to you as an instructor?
Hugely valuable, not only to me as a coach instructor, but similar to Mike, it's actually helped my personal game just looking at my stats, seeing my trends, seeing things that I wasn't aware of. The way I describe this to my clientele is this is the next best thing to shot length that the PGA Tour has. Now you have the ability to have just as many, if not the same stats that the tour players have. When you talk about performance, someone earlier tonight talked about you can fix your game or you can fix how you play the game. Game golf is all about fixing how you play the game, as
right.
Mike said, without
right.
needing the technical change. Do you have to invest as much time in this change? Well, you still have to invest some time to understand you and the story of your game, and that's what I feel is the real critical mass factor here, is Game Golf tells the complete story of your game, from the total number of feet that you putt in a round down to the strokes gained graphs that it provides that the tour players are looking at on a daily basis. It's an incredible piece of data, an incredible tool and resource where if I'm able to sit down even with an 18 handicap and say, you know what, you don't hit that 7-iron 150, you hit it 128. And if we plot all these 128s onto a green graphic, it literally, here's the flag, here's the green, we see everything short. The power of seeing it, it's a picture tells 1,000 stories.
Right.
The data that Game Golf produces some very powerful imagery that has literally, pardon the expression, kicked the butt of some of my clients that have, without making any swing changes, all of a sudden they come back and they've got these significant changes to their score simply because they're seeing who they are, the story of who they are as a golfer, and they don't like the story. So they take ownership of that data, they take ownership of their performance and their stats, and literally make changes on their own because they don't like how the story reads.
Right. And Mike, you said something very interesting, which obviously those of us in the golf industry understand this much more so than the amateurs, but people don't realize that they're not hitting it as far as what they think they do. and really it's difficult to gauge that. So what I want you to do, if you wouldn't mind, Mike, is to sort of walk us through the process a little bit. Let's say I've recently purchased the product, and I've got my device on my belt, and I've got the tags in the clubs. Walk us through a scenario, if you will. So I'm on the first tee, and I'm ready to tee off. How specifically does the device work from that point? What actually happens? How do the devices communicate with one another, and how does it gather that feedback information?
Yeah, so there's when you go to hit the shot, I mean, you can tag before the shot, you can tag after the shot, and there's a whole another conversation about tagging before the shot because there's a lot of pre-shot routines that condone, the tagging process to get you into the moment to, like John's work with focus band to get that quiet eye, do things like, we're seeing Jason Day do these days.
Right.
So there's a whole another conversation around tagging, but essentially when you tag, you're going to feel the device is going to vibrate. There's three lights that are on the device. One of the lights will turn green, and it'll stay green for 60 seconds, so that if you're in the moment, you're trying to hit the shot. You look down after you hit the shot, just make sure you tagged, and it's still green. Okay. So that's the process of tagging on every shot. So now with Bluetooth, if you wanted to, you can scroll back through and take a look at what you did the previous holes. It's good to note that if you actually don't use your phone, that we're allowed under the rules of golf to be used in tournament play. So I can actually I can go out and record a competitive round, and it's legal.
Wow, that's incredible. So then just to make sure, because I want to make sure the audience, obviously they don't have the benefit of seeing this visually, during our conversation. So I just want them to understand. So while I'm on the tee, as an example, I've tagged, I'm ready to go. I hit my shot. I now walk up to wherever the ball happens to be, whether it's in the fairway or left or right. At this point, it's relevant. But so what happens now? How does it record that information? Do I tag it again, and at that point, it now knows that's where my drive went? Is that essentially how it works?
That's exactly how it works. So you're tagging before you hit every shot. So when I'm on tee, I tag with my driver. I go out in the fairway. I tag with my 8-iron. It records an 8-iron's being hit. Now we know what the yardage is of the drive, and we also know where it is in respect to the fairway.
Now,
so you do it on putts every shot.
Right. And I noticed I obviously went to the website earlier to take a look at some of the imagery that you had on there, and it obviously was able to give you dispersion patterns, which is obviously, John, goes right into your wheelhouse, what you talked about earlier. Is there a point where during a practice session that this technology can be used, that be able to give information? I guess you can't really walk out into the range, but is there an opportunity at this product in the future, or can it at this point now help somebody in a practice session?
I would. Mike.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mike. You can answer the technical question better, and from the practice area, I can answer that.
Yeah, so I mean, currently it's used in during the course of play. And one thing that John said earlier that we kind of glossed over is, and I was on a conference call today talking about wearables, and there's a lot of wearable technology right now where you're able to record things, but you don't necessarily do anything with it. And what John talked about, from the stats standpoint and strokes gained, the strokes gained is. So not only are we collecting all this data, but we're actually, we're coming back to the golfer and saying, okay, here's what this means, because not everybody's that analytical. And the whole strokes gained is based on Dr. Brody's, every shot counts. But coupled with it's great to have stats, but the beauty is Game Golf is also giving you the visuals and the solutions. So, I can go out with my Fitbit and they can tell me, where I've gone and so forth, but here we're doing much more. We're giving you the visual because there's a visual side of this and also solutions.
And from the practice standpoint of view, Ted, this isn't. I would tell you it's practice rounds where this pays off as well as competitive rounds, and it picks up where a flight scope leaves off. Obviously, flight scope's out on the range, and it's giving you not only ball data. It's giving you club data. Game Golf doesn't necessarily give you the club data because that's not the important thing that you're playing. The important thing is that you are playing, and let's pay attention to every shot and let's see how each shot performs, not only singularly but collectively as one whole round. So it's literally, I would call it a partner resource of mine. I can use Flight Scope all day long on the range, but until I put you under the heat of the moment, do we really know what you're doing from a performance standpoint of view, from ball score statistics. Like Mike said, it's providing data, usable data, and solutions within that data that just sort of stare you in the face. You scratch your head and go, wow, why didn't I figure that out before?
Mike, does some of the data that we get back, like, as you mentioned, obviously you're tagging each shot as you're playing your round. Will it give you, in some of your stats that you sort of get fed back, will it give you an average for your irons? Like, for instance, if you hit, 6 or 7, 8 irons in a given round, does it have the ability at this point to give you an average, or do you have to sort of build that out yourself with the data that comes back?
No, we do provide averages by club. So after you've recorded a few rounds, yeah, absolutely. And then mathematically, if I punch out a 6 iron or I top a drive, mathematically we just eliminate the outliers, both on the short side and the long side. And after 10 rounds, I looked at my bag because now I knew my average yardage by club, and I had significant gaps in my bag. So I went and replaced. I had 2 hybrids that went the same distance. My 4 iron was shorter than my 5 iron. So I went and put, different clubs in my bag, and that's not my, I'm not a club junkie, but I saw that, there was yardages, there were gaps in my bag, and I went and addressed it because now I had the information to help me do it.
So this is really a great tool, and this was going to the point I was getting at, a great tool for those that really don't understand how far they're hitting specific clubs or any of their clubs, because, again, you can't always gauge. I mean, the signs out on some of the ranges are not always 100% accurate. I know that they try to give the illusion that they are, but as we all know, that sometimes they may be off a little bit. So if you're trying to get an idea of exactly how far you're hitting, or an average of how far you're hitting specific clubs or all your clubs, this is certainly Game Golf gives you the opportunity to do that through the rounds that you play, correct?
That's correct.
It also allows you to compare. It allows you to compare clubs. In Mike's case, he actually has 3 different drivers that he's trying out or using, say, over the past couple of months. And you're literally, with different tags with each different club, you'll see averages of those 3 different golf clubs. So he's actually able to compare that as well.
Yeah. I picked up 15 yards by going to a regular shop driver.
Wow, that's incredible. So, I mean, there's a lot of feedback that it's giving you. Now, I noticed also, Mike, going on the website, that there were you have a newer version now, a live version. Tell us the difference between your classic and the live. What's different about that?
The classic, the original product was you were just recording your rounds. You were tagging as you were out playing. At the conclusion of the round, you went and connected to your computer via USB and uploaded the rounds. Mm-hmm. Now what's happening, the new device is Bluetooth, so you're able to, you can actually have it synced while you're playing, or you can as soon as you get into the 19th hole, you can turn on your phone, upload your round right there on your phone.
Wow! So you're getting that information instantaneous. You don't have to wait till you go back home, so you can, while you're having a cocktail at the 19th hole, you can look at the information from your day's round.
Exactly. Or if you bomb that drive on 3 and you want to see how far you hit it, you can see it.
It gives you some bragging rights. Right.
The other thing it does, Ted, is once you've played that round and you've signed for your round, you can share that with your coach. I follow several of my players who share their round. As soon as they're done playing, I can get instantaneous feedback of their round and be able to comment on it, pat them on the back, console them if they need some consoling. It's a really interactive tool as well from the standpoint of view of a coaching relationship. It's done wonders for me with my out-of-town clients as far as me being able to keep up with them in real time versus trying to remember to email them or call them every couple of weeks. Every time they go out and play and they sign their round, I get an email saying, hey, so-and-so played and this was the score, and I can immediately dive into their round and see what they did.
So you can get information, including the complete stats through that, or you just get the overall picture?
I can get the complete stats.
Wow, I mean that's a great tool for a coach. Now I also see too, Mike, that there's your products have the ability to share that information, obviously as John just talked about with the coach now, but also allows you the opportunity to compete with other golfers through the product as well. Tell us a little bit about how that works.
Yeah, so very similar to what John just said is, I'm following several hundred golfers, but I've got my buddies that, I'm getting emails. I can see, by following them, I'll get emails showing me their rounds, and I can go see shot for shot what they did.
Right.
But I can post my rounds, via Facebook or Twitter if I choose to. So there's a whole social side to this and a lot of fun. We've got this comparison screen where I can compare myself to my buddies for, longest drive, greens and regulation, putts, whatever we want to measure, we can do it. And then we also have the ability, if somebody wants to have some fun, they can create some challenges with their buddies.
Wow, that's interesting. And also too, I see that you're able to do it with those pros that are also involved with it as well. And I'm talking about obviously PGA pros and others. You're able also to sort of compare yourselves to how they're doing with the system as opposed to what you're doing. Correct?
Yeah, I can compare myself to Graham McDowell, Lee Westwood, Jim Furyk, Chesson Hadley, Sophie Walker, and the most recent sign was Maria Verkanova, the Russian player. So, what John said earlier is the PGA Tour players have shot link, and Sophie Walker came to us. She's playing on the European Tour, and she says, I don't have that information. So both she and Maria are both using it in competitive play so they can track this information.
Which now, is you something also worth noting, Ted, not one of those people that Mike mentioned are paid to use it. They're all wanting to use it for various reasons, for their own good. They're unpaid promoters of the product.
Yeah, that's great. I like that. If somebody wants to, we'll give the website information out here in a minute. But if somebody wants to go and see, do you have some YouTube videos available on that they can see how it works a little bit more, or is that on the website?
There's a lot. If you scroll down to the bottom in support, there's a lot of video there. There's a tremendous amount of YouTube videos where you can see things. And I encourage people to go to our website because we're running $1 million sweepstakes right now.
Oh, okay, great.
So you don't have to purchase product to do it. And basically we're going to be holding drawings where the first tournament is going to be the U.S. Open, and we're going to pick a winner the week before. And if they actually pick the player, they win $5,000. If they actually pick the player and the score, they're going to win $250,000. So
wow.
That's set up over 4 different tournaments. So if the correct score isn't picked in the first 3 events, the 4th event's going to be worth $1 million.
So you're going to have a carryover. Wow, that's fantastic. So let's give them the website where they can go, and then I want to give you an opportunity to maybe share if there's anything new that's coming out that you want to share. Where do they go if they want to purchase the product, and where they can get additional information?
Right now they can go to their local golf shop, local retailers, and they can go to GameGolf.com to get the product. And right now we're actually running a dads and grads promotion at $100 off. So the product retails for $299, and it's available from now through Father's Day at $199.
Wow,
so
that's
great
fantastic.
savings on the Bluetooth.
For sure. Now, how long does obviously I'm assuming you have to charge the devices or the device up that you wear. How long will that device last, I guess, per charge, or how does it work?
Yeah, you charge it, just using your phone
Same
charger.
as you would like an iPhone?
And
okay.
Exactly, and it's gonna hold a charge for 10 hours.
Okay.
And if you don't pull the rounds off it, it can store up to 10 rounds. So if I wanted to, if I didn't have the Bluetooth version and I went over to Ireland and played 10 rounds, it would store all those rounds and I could upload them when I came home.
Wow, very good. John, obviously you've found this to be a valuable tool not only for yourself to use, but obviously for students. Is this something that really more and more teachers should become involved with, this type of technology, to not only help their students, but also, to be able to help themselves, I guess, really? As you said, you noticed a big improvement just from using getting some of the information that you got.
I don't see any reason why someone wouldn't want to use this, other than maybe they just don't want to change their habits, or they think they know this data. And there's no way they can know all the data. They may know greens and drag, and fairways hit, and number of putts, but this goes much, much deeper. And nobody I've ever taught to this point walks around with an Excel spreadsheet and documents everything. And
right.
That's what this does. So to me, it's sort of a no-brainer. When I get clients who are ultra dedicated to their game, the mini tour players, better amateurs, they normally come to me and want more time out of me and keep me on a retainer to do so. And one of the first things I hand them is game golf, and it's a must. It's, hey, if we're going to have this coaching relationship, and if you're going to want things out of me, I need the data so I can provide that to you. So it's a must. I literally will hand them a unit, put the tags on the clubs, and show them how it works. And it takes a little while for some people. I've got some people that readily adapt in the very first round, and that's always a good thing. But typically, Mike said 5 to 10 rounds. I've seen trending with some of my clients at 2 rounds, where they're literally making an adjustment to their bag. More than likely, they're making an adjustment to their decision-making out on the golf course, which therefore leads to better rounds long-term, not just short-term. So I don't know why anyone would not want to do this, other than they just don't want the true story of their game.
Yeah, I agree with that. Mike, is there anything, sort of what's the next generation? Are you guys working on some things now? I mean, I know obviously some things you may not want to give out right now, but is there sort of a next generation, or is there some additional technology that you're working on right now to even improve what you've already got?
No, that's a great question. I mean, we're always looking at, what the next version is going to be, but I think what's, we haven't mentioned here is the team is in San Francisco. We've got some great engineers, and what they're always doing is creating more views and more value for anybody that has the product. So, we rolled out strokes gained in January. Anybody that bought the product, a year prior didn't have that. As soon as we rolled it out, it was available to every golfer on our platform. So I would say it's, analytics that we continue to work on a regular basis. So the value of the product just goes up over time for anybody that purchases it. So, in the short term, it's really creating more things. You'll see live leaderboard coming here shortly. And, so that, if John and I are out playing, we can actually, and we're both using live, we can actually, have some fun and have a game on the golf course.
Wow. It's just amazing really what the technology is able to provide us now. It just literally baffles the mind. Mike, I want to thank you for joining us tonight, and I appreciate shedding the light on game golf. I think it's a fantastic product, and I think, as John had articulated, I think that anybody really should be asking the question is why not use this technology. It's giving them a lot of information, and as you, Mike, pointed out yourself, it's helped you make some decisions on making adjustments in your golf bag. A lot of players, especially high handicappers out there, carry a lot of clubs in their bag that are really not benefiting them, and this information that they're getting using your product is going to help them make a much better informed decision about what they carry in their bag the next time they go to the golf course.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for having me. I enjoyed it.
I
John,
appreciate it. Thank
you. To you as well.
Thank you, Mike, and
thank you.
much continued success with the product, and would love to have you come back on again sometime.
I'd love it.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. John, let me ask you, obviously it's a very interesting product. How long have you been using the product?
I've been using it since it first came out. I had some difficulties with the initial product, but worked through them. And the live product, I actually tested before it was put out on the market. I tested it in November and was thrilled, absolutely thrilled with what it was doing. It made my job even that much easier. I didn't have to come home and put it on the computer and upload it. I got it instantaneously. It everything they do, as Mike said, they're constantly improving it and updating it. I see my app on my phone updated about once every 14 to 20 days with something new, a new view, a new stat, a new way of looking at an existing stat. It's pretty powerful information and a really good. The Mr. McGuire, the guy who thought about this, he really thought about it. He's not leaving a stone unturned when it comes to trying to provide the average amateur what the pro has from a data resource standpoint of view. My hat's off to him. Like I said, it's a staple if someone's really wanting to play well with me. It's a must, and if they're not willing to buy it, I just hand it to them.
Yeah. And I like the fact that it gives a lot of information. I mean, traditionally, as you pointed out earlier, people were more concerned with, how many greens I'm hitting in regulation, fairways hit, and that information is certainly good and it's certainly useful. But it just, from my understanding of what this particular product does, is it gives you so much more information. And as Mike pointed out, we talked about briefly, a lot of players don't understand how far they're hitting their clubs. And until you really understand that, it's very difficult to make informed decisions out in the golf course. If you're not sure how far you're hitting each of your clubs and you're getting out there and, whether you're 150 or 200 yards away, and you don't really have an understanding of how far those clubs are going, then you're not really going to select necessarily the proper club. So this tool not only tracks the information that it's getting from each of your rounds, but it's providing you with valuable information to make an informed decision when you're playing future rounds. So, whether you get it in 2 rounds, as you suggested with some of your clients, or 5 to 10, as Mike talked about, is typically the average. Literally within a month or 2, depending on how much golf you play, you can get a pretty detailed and accurate informed decision of how you're playing each of your rounds, and deciding what clubs need to be left at home and swapped out or thrown out or sold on eBay or something, or Amazon, is pretty much what you're getting from this product, correct?
Correct. And as I was saying, this is the way I would sum it up. If you've got the opportunity to learn more about your game, and it's literally just fingertips away, which is what Game Golf does, why not? Like I say, it's almost a well, it is a no-brainer for even the higher handicap, because the information that's provided lends itself to, I'm going to call it, not necessarily instant gratification, but with some small tweaks to maybe how you think about hitting shots or how you go about the process of your pre-shot routine or whatever the case may be. You can literally see some instant improvement in your game.
Right.
Sometimes it bewilders me why people don't look at that. The argument can be made, hey, I spend a lot of money on equipment. This is one piece of equipment. It's a no-brainer you shouldn't be without it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like, again, the information that it's giving you is useful information. I mean, there's a lot of products out there that, record certain data that is interesting, and it might bear some discussion, but it's really not giving you a benefit. And obviously, Game Golf's products are giving you a benefit and going to change your end result. And people want to improve golf and at the game and want to obviously have fun at it. And if you're continually frustrated all the time because you're making poor choices or bad decisions out on the golf course because you're not dealing with the information that you need to have, and you know, as one of the guests talked about earlier in Coach's Corner, I think it was Tony Brooks mentioned, you know, he's only seeing some of his students maybe once a week or once every couple of weeks, depending on the setup. You know, a coach can only do so much. They can't see every round that you're playing. Well, this gives them that opportunity to be engaged with your rounds on a regular basis. They can see what you're doing and where you're having difficulties and what clubs you're getting the most benefit from. So there's a lot of useful information, not just for the player, but also if you're working with a coach or a teach professional, if you're willing to partner up with them in the process, it can really help open their eyes considerably onto how you're playing.
Agreed. Totally agree.
Well, John, I hate to say this, but we're coming to the end of the program. I've enjoyed the conversation. It was interesting to hear about some of the things that you've been doing with the GRIP project, and I'd love to hear, as the study continues, I'd love to hear more about that. So you'll have to come back again and share that a little further along in the process when you've got some more information to share. But also enjoyed Mike coming on and talking about Game Golf. I think it's a great product and deserves a closer look, not just by some of the students and some of the amateurs out there, but also other coaches and teaching professionals that are listening to the program. If you're not only already familiar with the product, go to GameGolf.com. Check it out. I think it's something you may not only want to get for yourself, but it may be something that you want to encourage your students to get as well. So I strongly urge you to do that. John, just in the closing minute or two, why don't you tell the good folks how they can reach out and contact you if they want to learn more information about John Hughes Golf?
Sure, and once again, Ted, thanks for the opportunity. It's rare that we get to do this just solo, you and I, for an hour. Mm-hmm. And whenever I can bring up some different things, some new things that aren't necessarily always discussed, it's always a lot of fun from my end as well as yours, I'm sure. John at John Hughes Golf is my email address. John Hughes Golf is the website. My phone number is there as well. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty accessible. I pretty much promise people that if you contact me before 5 o'clock Eastern every day, you're going to get some kind of reply from me, and I pretty much hold to that. I lose some sleep every once in a while during the busy season because of it, but I do hold true to that because when someone really wants to improve their game, I want to be there for them and be able to supply that for them. And just as we get into the shorter season or the off season, I'm going to call it here in Florida, you're probably going to see some things from me social media-wise that are great opportunities to come out, meet me, get around the golf at Falcon Style where I teach, and combine some things, instruction and play, and have a good time and be able to enjoy yourself.
Well, John, it's always a pleasure. I enjoy your input and comments on the panel discussion, but I also appreciate you coming on as a featured guest as well and bringing us up to speed on some of the things that you're working on. It's always interesting to see what other professionals are doing out there, and there's really so many things that we can talk about, so I'll have you again in the future on a separate segment. But I look forward to the next time that you're going to be on Coach's Corner. So, John, have a great Memorial weekend. I appreciate it as always.
You do the same, Ted.
And I look forward to having you back on again.
Again, appreciate it, and you have a great Memorial Day weekend as well.
All right. Thanks, John.
Yep.
All right. That was my very special guest, John Hughes, PGA Master Professional, Vice President of the North Florida PGA Section. And as I mentioned, he is the PGA of America Horton Smith Award recipient back in 2013 and has been recognized as one of the top 30 instructors by Golf Tips magazine. Certainly a well-seasoned veteran of the game, and as he very clearly articulated, enjoys helping others out there. And I also want to thank, excuse me, you can tell I'm getting tired. I want to thank also for joining us Mike Hammond, the Director of Channel Sales at Game Golf. Go to GameGolf.com to learn more information about a great product. I'm certainly going to be checking it out a little bit more thoroughly. myself, but sounds like a great product out there for, as I said, not just the those of you that want to improve your game and play better, but also for some of the instructors out there as well that might be tuning into the program. Here's a good opportunity, a great opportunity for you as well to get a product that I think can help both you and the student play better golf, and that's really what it's all about. So I want to take this opportunity to thank all of you for tuning in faithfully each and every week. I really do enjoy having this opportunity to share what I feel is a great game with a lot of you out there, and I enjoy having a lot of the guests like I did this evening and each and every week. So I will see you next Thursday at 6 p.m. Central right here on Golf Talk Live. God bless everybody and have a great and safe Memorial weekend.